Hello, and we are on week 12, session 2. I hope you enjoyed the speeches from yesterday. But today, then, we're going to apply some of that learning to our own memory and delivery of our own speeches. Okay? But as a warm-up, part of this process, as you start to go through the memorization and the delivery of your speeches, you might even see in the written speech itself areas that you want to edit and improve. Because sometimes it's not until you start speaking your speeches out, practicing them, that even then there might be a sentence and you think, actually, as I'm trying to learn that sentence, I can see it doesn't make sense or it's not quite working. So this process is always about upgrade. Okay, this isn't about what's wrong with your speeches. It's about at different stages you might see an opportunity to upgrade and make your speech even better. So you have to see this almost like as a cyclical process, that as you begin to memorize and practice delivery today, there might be a part of your speech you say, actually, that there's a better word I could use there, or that sentence isn't quite working, or actually that paragraph could go in that place and I could change the order. So don't think as you're starting this process that this is about just learning what you've got off by heart. There's also space in this process to improve, particularly after the work we did yesterday. We thought about these 4 E's of persuasion. Is my speech engaging? Am I bonding with my audience? Is my speech proving that I'm right? Is my speech using language to make key points stand out? Is my speech using language to make people feel something? So again, we know we've got this whole variety of techniques that can be used to improve our speeches. Okay, and we looked at this table yesterday. We saw some of the ways that the famous speeches or the published speeches we were following this kind of criteria. And just as a little warm-up, I want you to have a look at this paragraph. Now, it says here this is a super paragraph. This paragraph is persuasive. There's nothing wrong with this paragraph. But is there anything missing? So it says, could you suggest at least 3 changes that you might make to this student's work? So I have lost count of all the times that I have visited an area of outstanding beauty and either witnessed litter being dropped, seen it in piles on the road, or clumps in the ocean. It is only now that people are starting to realise that climate change and pollution are a growing problem that will affect the generations to come more than any other. So what I want you to do, okay, just press pause in a minute and just see, are there any areas, could you suggest 3 ways that we could use any of these techniques to make this paragraph better? So you might suggest that we need to use more inclusive pronouns, or an anecdote is in there, but actually we could use more emotive words. So just have a little think. What 3 things would you perhaps improve or change in this paragraph? Okay, so I looked at this and I thought, actually, we could make some improvements. So if you look, I have lost counts of all the times that I have visited an area of outstanding beauty, and actually what I've paused here and I've changed it. I've gone for a much more emotive vocabulary, haven't I? And been appalled by the devastating impact humans have had on the natural world. So I've really done this exaggerated emotive language choices: appalled, devastated. And what I've also done then is I've actually then created this simple sentence: litter carelessly dropped. So whereas here I had and witnessed either litter being dropped, I've now introduced that carelessly. I've made it a single sentence. Now, in this last bit, I had piles on the road or clumps in the ocean. And I've decided to go for our metaphorical language. Remember, we did those lovely lessons on using metaphors. So here I've got mountains of waste lining the roadside, plastic that won't degrade. So I've introduced some research, the idea that plastic won't degrade. So I've been much more specific rather than just clumps in the ocean. For hundreds of years floating in the ocean. It is only now that people are starting to realize that pollution is an insidious issue that's destroying our world. So I've got this lovely our world here. So I've got the inclusive pronoun. I've brought in some of our vocabulary, that powerful word insidious. And can you see what else I've now done? I've created a sentence that begins in the same way. It is only now. It is only now. So I've also used anaphora here. So I've upped my rhetorical features. It is only now that people are starting to realize that our generation will be the ones who suffer the consequences of mindlessly destroying our home. So I've done that first E. I've made a greater engagement with my audience by using first person inclusive pronouns. I've done the emotive vocabulary, and I've done that use of rhetorical figures such as the anaphora. So I've made 3 changes, and suddenly my paragraphs are much more powerful. So remember, as we go through this process of delivery and memorization today, that if there's anything in your speech that you suddenly see differently through this process, go for it, change it. Don't be afraid to see your speech. It's like malleable. I love that word. Malleable means it's molding. I can mold my speech. I continue to work with it like you work with metals to make the best product. Okay, so we've got to see our speeches, guys, as malleable objects in our hands. We can change them, we can mold them to make them even better. But we are going to be thinking today then, so that idea of memory and delivery. What can I remember by heart and how can I say it? And that means today we're going to be thinking about what we call improvisation and learning by rote. Now, improvisation is what we do when we kind of remember something, but we don't remember it exactly, and we begin to improvise. So improvisation has a role to play in speeches. Okay, there's going to be maybe a sentence that you have written down, but actually when you come to deliver your speech on the day, you might end up not remembering it exactly, and you have to improvise. You have to work with what's in your memory that maybe you haven't learnt by heart to maybe fill a gap in the speech, to create an extra idea. And actually, one part sometimes with these speeches is you're asked to answer questions. And those are questions you don't prepare for. You have questions that the audience might pose to you. So you are improvising. So improvising is the ability to respond in a way that you maybe haven't planned for. But it's still linked to memory because your ability to improvise is still about drawing down information that's stored in your memory. And as you draw down the information that's stored in your memory, you're improvising, you're using it on the spot in a new way. But there's also an expectation that certain aspects of your speech you will learn by rote. Now, rote learning is the old school way of working memory, which is about repetition and practice. Repetition and practice. It's like that very cool song by Fatboy Slim, Eat, Sleep, Rave, Repeat. Okay, so when we're talking about learning it by rote, it's eating, meditating, thinking, mulling over your speech, saying certain lines over and over again. So you're like literally digesting them, you're eating them. Sleep, you have a little rest. Okay, so in between learning things by memory, you have to let your brain rest. Now the rave, okay, you're gonna love this because eat, sleep, rave, repeat is the line is the lyric from the song. Now there is guidance with memorization moving around. So we're not literally going to rave, but we are going to remember that as we're learning lines, sometimes walking around, changing position, using gesture can be a really important tool to memorization. And repeat, do it all again. So eat, sleep, rave, repeat is our acronym, is our little link we're going to use to memory. The eat, digest your lines, chew them over, practice saying them. That's the eating part. Sleep, have a rest. Rave, practice by moving around, using the energy of movement to help you remember stuff. And then repeat, we're going to do it all again. We're also going to remind ourselves of delivery. Now, delivery really is quite a big area. We look at this at A-level language. We talk about it in terms of paralinguistics. So paralinguistic means what aspects of speech are unspoken. Sounds strange, isn't it? But we speak without words sometimes. We convey messages and communicate how we feel or think about a topic through our pace, through our tone, through volume, through variation, through gesture. Now, pace is all about speed. Now, I mentioned yesterday I'm naturally quite a quick talker. I think that's because I'm a quick thinker. My brain works quite fast. So pace relates to the speed with which I speak. Now, anybody knows that this is sometimes, and this links to the word variation in it, that sometimes we need to slow down. Okay, sometimes it is absolutely crucial that we are slow and controlled in our pace to deliver the message in the right way. But the danger without variation, that very slow pace can become monotonous, and we actually end up creating a switch off in our audience if we keep the pace the same. But what I would argue is that there are certain points in which you can pick up the pace, you can change the tone, volume, boom, and that variation wakes your audience up. So pace is to do with speed, the speed at which I speak. Okay, now in music you do pace, okay, and you talk about, you can use metronomes to keep pace. Okay, so we're talking about the difference really between slow, medium, and fast. Okay, now tone is how we create emotion behind what we're saying, so we can speak with a serious tone, an angry tone, a happy tone. Now, when you're doing this for yourselves, you might not realize, but actually your tone is matched to your facial expression. So when I smile, my tone automatically becomes happier. If I want to create a somber tone, I have to keep my lips from smiling, my eyes fixed forward, and my tone is very different. Now, volume is something sometimes we have lots of control over. Some people aren't aware of volume. I always tell a sad story about a young girl with a perforated eardrum that means I have no control over volume, which is why I tend to be quite loud, because actually my volume gauge is slightly off. But volume is about whether I'm speaking really quietly, very quiet, so we whisper. We can whisper, we can speak quietly, we can increase our volume and get louder and louder. Boom! Are you awake back there? So we can control our volume. Now, variations suggest that really what we want in an ideal speech is a mix of pace, tone, and volume. Now, we don't just do this randomly. We think about tone, pace, and volume in conjunction with key words, key sentences, key ideas that we want to draw attention to. Okay, and we think about using pace, tone, and volume to manipulate audience response. We want to draw them in, we want to get them close, and then we want to hit them with something that's going to knock them off. Now, but we're going to practice. The other thing about delivery is what we call gesture. Now, when you can't see somebody and you're practicing these at home, gestures sometimes can be something people do quite naturally. There are people out there that are big gestures. I use my hands all the time. I'm very handsy. For some of you, you can want to think like gesture, like a conductor. And we can use hands. Now, not only hands, we can gesture with our hands, but we can gesture with our whole body. We can orientate ourselves towards the audience. We can look, move our heads, but we can orchestrate what we're saying. So again, if we were raising volume, we might raise our hands, shake a fist, point, direct our audience with our hands. Now, we don't want to go too crazy. We're not conducting traffic. If you've ever seen those traffic conductors, but gesture can be really important, and it can help you with the memorization. So if you know that there's a certain line that's really tricky, think about how you can use your hands to help you remember it, how you can use your body, your orientation. So gesture can be facial expressions, hands, body. It's a big area, but that combination of delivery and memory can really help us have impact. So we're going to practice with delivery first. So guys, when we talk about delivery, actually this is a really good way that we text mark our speeches, okay? So for this, you might need to get your speech, you might need to print it out, you might need to put it on a different page, you might want to put it on a big piece of paper if you can. I know that's quite tricky with materials, because what you're going to see here is I've started to text mark, I've started to go through those two paragraphs and begin to make notes and directions for myself. Okay, so, and you do this by speaking your speech out loud. Okay, you do this process by starting to speak it out loud. Now, when it comes to memorization, if you record your speech, that can help, but you could record your speech and then listen back and say, well, actually, this is what I want to do. So I've said here, I have lost count of all the times that I visited an area of outstanding beauty and have been appalled by the devastating impact humans have had on the natural world. Well, now that's quite a long sentence. So the first thing is I might want to emphasize some of the words here. Appalled's a very strong word, so I might want to say that word a little bit louder. Okay, I've said that I might want to pause after the word humans and look around at the audience. And I've said here that after each full stop, I definitely want to pause for 2 to 3 seconds to allow the audience some thinking time. And I might want to use my hands to emphasize this idea of mountains. I might want to do a big sweeping hand gesture, mountains of waste. Now, I've said that in that second paragraph, I definitely want to use maybe tone and pace to draw attention to the fact that each sentence has the same beginning. It is only now. Now, with this practice of delivery, you can practice making notes and change them, but it's a really good way to start to think about delivery. Okay, so just pause there, get your speeches ready, and we're going to practice text marking them for delivery.